Welcome back to episode 3 of this series. I have decided now is a good time to film quite a load of these. So today we're looking at the effect of earthquakes. So if you've not watched the other two, I have created a playlist with them all in so far, which I'll link up here if I do so remember. I might also put them all in the description box, just so that you've got access to them all from like the previous days if you do want to go and watch them. But yeah, let's get straight on into this. The earthquakes in Chile and Nepal. Earthquakes can have devastating effects on people's lives and activities. The primary effects are caused by ground shaking and include deaths and injuries and damage to roads and buildings. The secondary effects are the results of the primary effects, such as ground shaking, and include tsunamis, fire, landslides, injuries from collapsing buildings. Responses to earthquakes include emergency care and support and help with longer-term reconstruction. Let's think about Chile. This is what happened on the 27th of February 2010, when a very powerful earthquake measuring 8.8 on the Richter scale struck just off the coast of central Chile. The earthquake occurred at a destructive plate margin. These are moving together like we discussed last time, where the Nazca plate is moving beneath the South America plate. It was followed by a series of small aftershocks. Because the earthquake occurred out at sea, tsunami warnings were issued as waves raced across the Pacific Ocean at speeds of 800 kilometers an hour. The primary effects. Around 500 people were killed and 12,000 were injured. There were over 800,000 people affected by this earthquake. 220,000 homes, 4,500 schools, 53 ports, 56 hospitals and other public buildings were also destroyed. The port of Talcahuano, I'm going to say that's how it's pronounced, and Santiago Airport were badly damaged. Much of Chile lost power, water supplies and communications, and the cost of the earthquake was estimated to be about $30 billion. The secondary effects. 1,500 kilometres of roads were damaged, mainly by landslides actually, and remote communities were cut off for many days. Several coastal towns were devastated by tsunami waves. Several Pacific countries were struck by tsunami further afield, and there were warnings to prevent the loss of life there as well. And there was also a fire at a chemical plant near Santiago, and the area had to be evacuated. Now, let's think about Nepal. On the 25th of April 2015, Nepal was struck by an earthquake, measuring 7.9 on the Richter scale, so this was ever so slightly less than the Chile earthquake. The epicentre, which is where the earthquake is in relation to the Earth's surface, so they happen underneath on the crust, but the epicentre is where it is on the surface of the Earth. It was about 80 kilometres or 50 miles to the northwest of Nepal's capital Kathmandu, in the foothills of the Himalayas. This again is a destructive plate margin where the Indo-Australian plate is colliding with the Eurasian plate at a rate of about 45 millimetres per year. But remember, at these plate margins there is no volcanoes because there is no magma present, and these are just moving upwards, they're colliding, and we have these fold mountains being formed in the Himalayas here. The collision and pressure at this margin were responsible for the formation of the Himalayas. The earthquake was very shallow, just 15 kilometres below the surface. This resulted in very severe ground shaking and widespread landslides and avalanches. The earthquake caused damage hundreds of kilometres away in India, Tibet and Pakistan. The primary effects. 9,000 people died and 20,000 were injured. Over 8 million people, this is a third of Nepal's population, was affected. 3 million people were left homeless when homes were destroyed. Electricity and water supplies, sanitation and communication was affected. 1.4 million people needed food, water and shelter in the days and weeks after the earthquake. 7,000 schools were destroyed and hospitals were overwhelmed. International airports became congested, and that stopped aids getting into the country. 50% of shops were destroyed, affecting food supplies and people's livelihoods, and the cost of damage estimated over $5 billion US. The secondary effect of Nepal. The ground shaking triggered landslides and avalanches, blocking roads and hampering relief efforts. The avalanches on Mount Everest killed at least 19 people, the greatest loss of life on the mountain in any single incident. An avalanche in the Langtang region left 250 people missing. A landslide blocked the Kali Gahandi River, which was 140 kilometres, 90 miles northwest of the capital Kathmandu, and many people evacuated in case of flooding. And the earthquake occurred on land, and so actually it didn't cause a tsunami in this case. So we're going to be briefly looking at the question: discuss the extent to which contrasting levels of wealth influence the impact of tectonic hazards. So just to put this into perspective, Chile's GDP, gross domestic product, a measure of wealth, is 38th out of 193 countries. Nepal, on the other hand, is 109th out of 193 countries. And in comparison, the UK, just so that you kind of understand where we're at, is number 6th in GDP. The HDI, the Human Development Index, this is a measure of development. Chile is 41st out of 193. Nepal is 145th, so over 100 below Chile, and the UK is 14th. Chile is significantly more developed than Nepal. So let's have a look briefly at the effects of these earthquakes. In Chile, lots of people were evacuated. The tsunami that came as a result of that meant that many people needed to be evacuated. There was a lot of building loss, there was a lot of infrastructure loss, and things like power, water, sanitation was still affected. And the estimated cost was significantly higher at $30 billion US compared to Nepal's $5 billion US. But in Nepal, a third of the population was affected by this single earthquake. Half of their shops were lost, livelihoods were destroyed, 3 million people were left homeless. That is, what, a sixth of the population, which is just mind-boggling. An eighth maybe. 1.4 million people needed food, so think if the population's about 25 million people, 1.4 of them needed food, and so that's what, 6% of the population? No, can't be. Yeah. 6%? 6% of the population needed immediate food and water supply straight after the earthquake. Compared, I actually don't know the population of Chile. But yeah, there were massive differences, mainly because Chile was significantly more economically developed, so there were more buildings that not necessarily were destroyed, but the rebuilding efforts of those buildings and the worth of those buildings was more than they would have been in Nepal. So yeah, that is the summary of what we've gone through today. I hope it has been useful. As I say, it's quite late. If you watched my last one, you'll know the situation right now. But I hope you found this useful, and I will see you same time, same place tomorrow, 7 AM in the morning. Yay! GCSEs! You'll get there. It'll be fine. See you tomorrow.